All right, you've carved out some time. You're ready to absorb some knowledge. Perfect, because this isn't your average tech chat. We're diving deep into agentic coding today.
Mhm.
And our main focus, Anthropic's Claude Code. Think of it like, well, handing over some of that coding grunt work to a really smart AI sidekick.
Exactly. Claude Code lets you weave AI, these large language models, right into your daily coding. It's sort of like having that super experienced senior engineer, the one who's seen everything, right there in your terminal, ready to help out.
A senior engineer who doesn't need coffee or complain about that legacy code base. Sign me up. So what we're really trying to do here isn't just, a quick overview. We're digging into the best ways to actually use Claude Code effectively. We've looked at what Anthropic says and what other developers are finding works. So if you're trying to level up your coding with AI but maybe want to skip getting totally buried in documentation, stick around. We're aiming for those really practical tips, those aha moments.
Yeah, we're trying to cut through the noise, focus on what actually makes a difference, save you from that classic learn by trial and lots of error approach. It's a powerful tool for sure, but knowing how to use it, that's key.
Okay, so you've got this AI tool. Where do you even begin to make it feel like yours? How do you get it clued into your specific project, all its little quirks?
Right. The very first thing, the most critical step really, is tailoring Claude Code to your environment. It's smart out of the box, yeah, but you can seriously boost its understanding by feeding it project-specific context. Think of it like giving Claude the inside scoop on your code, the stuff you like the back of your hand, but would totally confuse an outsider.
And that inside scoop comes in the form of a claude.de.md file, is that right? Sounds like the project's secret decoder ring.
Precisely. Claudia.md is just a markdown file, but Claude automatically reads it and uses it as background info for everything you do together. It's the perfect spot to jot down all those essential project details that, aren't immediately obvious just by looking at the code.
Okay, so what kind of intel are we talking about here? What goes into this clue.md to make it actually useful?
Think about your everyday development tasks, like listing common bash commands, your usual scripts for build and testing, that kind of thing. That lets Claude grasp your workflow quickly, also pointing out the core files or key utility functions. It's like highlighting the MVPs in your code base for Claude.
Got it. So instead of Claude trying to figure out your build process from scratch every time, you just lay it out. What else is good to put in there?
Code style guidelines are huge for consistency, right? Whether you're all about ES modules in JavaScript or have specific formatting rules, document it. That way, the code Claude generates actually fits in. Include your testing procedures too, how to run tests, maybe which ones are most important, even stuff like repository etiquette,
Yeah.
your branching strategy, how you merge, that gives Claude context when it helps with Git stuff.
Okay, so not just the code itself, but the whole dance of how you and your team actually build things. What about those unique project oddities, the things that always trip up new people?
Oh, absolutely. Definitely detail your local dev setup. Maybe you need a specific node version or certain environment variables. Stops Claude making bad assumptions. And for sure, document any weird behaviors or warnings you see all the time. Think of it as leaving little warning signs for your AI buddy. Plus, really, anything else you find yourself wanting Claude to remember consistently. The more relevant context, the better it helps.
So this KLOUUDMD, it's not like some super strict formal document, more like a living cheat sheet for the AI.
Exactly that. Anthropic really emphasizes keeping it concise and, readable for humans. Like, could a new team member scan it and get the gist? That's the goal.
Yeah.
So yeah, list your key NPM commands like npm run dev, show a quick code style example, maybe outline your typical test lint workflow, simple stuff.
Now, where do these magic files actually live so Claude can find them?
Claude's pretty smart about finding them. The most common place is just the root directory of your project. If you call it keyeeee.md and check it to Git, boom, shared context for the whole team. But if you have personal tweaks you don't want to share, you can name it keyeee.local.md and just add that to your .jitignore, shared knowledge versus your private notes, basically.
The classic share versus keep it secret decision. Okay, but what if you're in a massive project, like a monorepo with tons of subprojects?
That's where it gets clever. Claude doesn't just look in the current directory, it actually looks up through the parent directories too. Super useful in monorepos. You might have a general CLIAL ED of it MD at the very top with overall rules and then more specific ones inside individual package folders for their unique details. Claude blends it all together.
Whoa, so if I'm way down deep in like root front end components buttons and I run Claude, It pulls context from buttons and components in front end of the root. That's like context inception.
Exactly. And it works the other way too, sort of. If you're asking about files in a specific child directory, it can prioritize a claudi.md inside that directory if one exists. Oh, and one more thing. For settings you want everywhere, no matter the project, you can stick a claudi.md in your home directory. Usually .claud, claud.md, your personal defaults, basically.
That's incredibly flexible, so you're not constantly telling it where to look.
Hmm.
And for lazy people like me, is there a way to get Claude to just write a basic one for me?
Huh. Yes, there is. The init command. Just run init in your project, and Claude will take a look around and generate a starting claudia.md for you. It's a great first step. Then you can go in and tweak it, add your specific stuff, kind of like Claude doing the initial legwork.
Okay, so we've got our claudia files placed, maybe even generated one, but it sounds like these aren't static. We need to tweak them, iterate.
Exactly right. Think of claud.md as a living prompt that's always feeding Claude info. A really common mistake is just dumping everything in there right away without seeing how Claude actually uses it. Anthropic suggests starting smaller with the most important stuff, see how Claude does, and then add or refine based on the results you're getting. Iterate on it.
So it's kind of experimental. Add an instruction, see what happens, tweak it if it's not quite right. Like training a very helpful but sometimes very literal assistant.
Precisely. You can just edit the file directly, obviously. But a neat trick is using the hashtag key in the chat, followed by your instruction. Claude will try to add that suggestion to the right, claud.md. A lot of people find that pretty smooth. And definitely commit your claud.md changes to Git. That way the whole team benefits as you figure out how to best instruct Claude for your project.
Teamwork makes the AI dream work. Okay, now Anthropic mentioned running these files through a prompt improver. That sounds pretty advanced, like AI whispering.
It is a bit. They sometimes use fancier techniques to really optimize the instructions, like using emphasis, maybe bolding key terms, or literally writing important or do not forget can help Claude really understand the priority or the nuance. It's all about finding the best way to communicate exactly what you mean for your project.
Right, so Claude knows our project secrets now. What about letting it actually, do things? I saw something about managing its allowed tools. Sounds like setting rules for an eager intern.
That's a great way to put it. By default, Claude is pretty cautious. It'll always ask you before it does anything that might change your system, writing files, running certain commands. That's a safety feature, obviously. Prevents accidents. But you can customize this allow list to speed things up, letting it use tools you trust without asking every single time.
Okay, how do we give Claude a bit more freedom, but responsibly? How do we expand that trusted toolkit?
Few ways. Easiest is during a session. When Claude asks permission, you might see an always allow option for that specific tool just for that session. You can also use the allowed tools command, like you could type allowed tools add edit to let it edit files freely, or allowed tools add bash git commit to let it run any git commit command, or even specific MCP tools. We'll get to MCP, like MCP Puppeteer, Puppeteer Navigate if you're using Puppeteer for browser stuff.
That allowed tools command seems handy for quick tweaks. What about setting up more permanent permissions?
For longer-term setups, you can edit the .claude_settings.json file in your project or the global.claude.json in your home directory. Anthropic usually suggests checking the project settings.json into Git so the whole team has the same tool permissions. And lastly, if you just need a specific permission for one run, you can use the allowed tools flag when you start Claude from the command line, like a temporary pass.
Lots of options there for managing what Claude can do. And also saw a note about GitHub and the GACLI. How does that fit in?
Yeah, if you live on GitHub, definitely install the official G command line tool. Claude Code knows how to use G really well for all sorts of GitHub tasks, creating issues, opening PRs, reading comments right from your terminal. If you don't have G installed, Claude might try using the API or an MCP server if you have one set up, but honestly, the G integration is usually the smoothest. It's like giving Claude a direct line to GitHub.
Okay, Claude's briefed. It knows the project. We've set some ground rules with permissions. Now let's talk about giving it even more superpowers, integrating external tools.
Exactly. Claude isn't just limited to its built-in skills. It can actually tap into your whole shell environment and even connect to more complex tools using something called the Model Command Protocol, or MCP, and REST APIs. Think of it as expanding Claude's toolbox way beyond the basics.
Let's start with the shell. How do we get Claude playing nicely with the bash tools and scripts we already use every day?
Well, since Claude runs in your shell, it already has access to a lot of standard command line stuff. But if you have custom scripts or less common tools, you might need to give Claude a heads up. Best way is to tell Claude the tool's name and show some examples of how to use it. You can even tell it to run the tool with help so it can read the documentation itself. And like we said, if you use a custom tool a lot with Claude, put its usage in your claude.md. It really helps Claude remember and use it effectively, like adding a custom tool definition.
Right, make our custom stuff discoverable. Now, you mentioned MCP, Model Command Protocol. Sounds a bit like a secret handshake between AI and tools. What is that?
Huh? Not quite secret, but it is a standard way for Claude Code to talk to and control other tools. Claude Code can actually act as both an MCP server and a client. As a server, other tools could talk to it, but more often, you'll use it as a client to connect to other MCP servers. You can set these connections up in three main ways: just for the current project, globally for all your projects, or by adding a .mcp.json file to your project repo and committing it. That file basically lists the MCP tools available for that specific project.
And what kinds of tools would we access via MCP? The Puppeteer and Sentry examples caught my eye.
Exactly those kinds of things. If you've got a Puppeteer MCP server running, Claude could use it to, say, control a browser for automated testing, taking screenshots, maybe even scraping web pages. Or a Sentry MCP server could let Claude look at your error logs to help diagnose problems. By listing these in your projects.mcp.json, everyone on the team gets access to these tools through Claude automatically. And if things aren't working right with MCP, there's a handy MCP debug flag you can use when starting Claude to get more troubleshooting info. It's like a built-in MCP debugger.
Okay, Bash tools, MCP. What's next for expanding Claude's repertoire? Custom/commands. That sounds really powerful for automating repetitive stuff.
Oh, it is. If you find yourself doing the same sequence of steps over and over, maybe debugging a certain type of error or generating boilerplate code, you can create custom/commands. These are basically prompt templates saved as markdown files inside a .claude commands folder in your project. Once you save them there, they show up in the menu in Claude, so you can trigger a whole workflow with one command. And again, commit these to Git, and the whole team can use them.
So like creating little recipes that Claude can follow with just a simple command. How do you pass in specifics like an issue number or a file name?
Good question. You use a special placeholder, arguments. Inside your Markdown template file, wherever you put arguments, whatever you type after the command name in Claude gets plugged in right there. Super flexible.
Got it. That fix GitHub issue.md example sounded really useful. Can you walk through how that might work?
Sure. So imagine fix GitHub issue.md in your .claude commands. It would contain a prompt outlining the steps. Use GHIssueView arguments to get the issue details. Understand the problem. Search the codebase. Implement the fix. Write tests. Run tests. Lint the code. Write a commit message. Push. Create a PR. All those steps defined in the Markdown. Then in Claude, you just type project.fixgithubissue1234 and arguments becomes 1234. Claude then follows all those steps for issue 1234. You can also put personal commands and .claude commands in your home directory, and those will be available in all your projects, your own personal automation library.
That is incredibly slick for handling common tasks. Okay, Claude is armed with knowledge and tools. How do we actually use it day to day? What are some common workflows people are finding effective?
Yeah, Claude's designed to be flexible, so there's no single right way. But definitely some common patterns have emerged that work really well for a lot of developers.
Let's start with explore, plan, code, commit. Sounds like a standard development cycle.
It is, but with a key Claude twist. Step 1. Ask Claude to really look at the relevant files, maybe images, URLs. You can point it generally or give specific names, but, and this is crucial, explicitly tell it not to write code yet. This is just about understanding the current state. For tricky problems, Anthropic really suggests using subagents here, basically getting Claude to break the problem down, maybe even ask itself questions to understand better before suggesting anything, like doing its homework first.
Right. Make sure Claude really gets the context before jumping to solutions. Makes sense. What's step 2?
Step 2 is explicitly asking Claude to make a plan. Anthropic actually suggests using the word think, or even think harder, ultra think, to encourage it to spend more effort considering different approaches and making a solid strategy. You can review the plan, maybe even have Claude write it down in a file or a GitHub issue so you have a clear roadmap.
Smart. Get aligned on the plan first. Then what?
Step 3 is the coding. Tell Claude to implement the plan. It's good to also ask it to sort of check its own work as it goes. Does this seem reasonable? And finally, step 4. Ask Claude to commit the changes, create a PR, maybe update the README or changelog if needed. The big takeaway for this workflow, especially for complex stuff, is really emphasizing steps 1 and 2. Don't let Claude just jump straight to coding without that deep exploration and planning.
Plan the work, work the plan. Got it.
Ah,
What's another common workflow? I know Anthropic mentioned a favorite.
yes. Their favorite, especially for changes that are easy to verify, is write tests, commit, code, iterate, commit. It's basically test-driven development, but with Claude.
Ah, TDD powered by AI. How does Claude help with that?
Okay, step 1. Ask Claude to write the tests first, based on the inputs and outputs you expect. Make sure you mention you're doing TDD, so it doesn't try to write fake implementation code yet. Step 2. Tell Claude to run those new tests and confirm they fail, because the code doesn't exist. Again, explicitly tell it not to write the implementation yet. Step 3. Once you're happy with the failing tests, ask Claude to commit just the tests. Now you have a clear target.
Right, you've defined exactly what success looks like with those failing tests. What's next?
Step 4 is the implementation. Tell Claude to write the code needed to make those tests pass without changing the tests themselves. This might take a few tries. Claude writes code, runs tests, sees what fails, adjusts, runs tests again until they all pass. Anthropic even suggests maybe using subagents here too to double-check the code isn't just like cheating to pass the test, but is actually solving the problem properly. Step 5. Commit the working code. The great thing here is Claude works best when it has a really clear goal, and tests provide exactly that.
That's really neat. The tests become the specification for Claude. Okay, what about visual stuff, like building UIs?
Yeah. For visual targets, there's the write code, screenshot result, iterate workflow, great for front-end work or anything visual.
How does that usually go?
First, you need a way for Claude to see its work. That might mean using a Puppeteer MCP server for browser screenshots, maybe an iOS simulator MCP, or even just you manually copying and pasting screenshots back into the chat. Second, give Claude the target paste in a mock-up image, drag one in, or give it a file path to the design. Third, tell Claude, implement this design, take a screenshot, and keep tweaking the code until the screenshot matches the mock-up. It's an iterative loop. Fourth, when you're happy, tell Claude to commit. People find the results get much better after just a few rounds of this feedback loop.
So literally showing Claude the picture you wanted to create with code. Cool. Okay, those are some solid structured workflows. But what if you just need something quick and dirty? I saw this term safe YOLO mode. Sounds a bit wild.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And yeah, use this one with care. Safe YOLO mode means using the dangerously skip permissions flag when you start Claude. Basically, it tells Claude, just do it. Don't ask for permission. Just run the commands until the task is done. It can be useful for really simple, low-risk things like fixing a ton of basic lint errors automatically or generating some straightforward boilerplate code.
Okay, dangerously is definitely the key word there. What's the catch? The risk.
The risk is Claude doing something unintended because it didn't ask. It could delete files, mess up your environment, maybe even run something malicious if the prompt was tricky. Anthropic strongly recommends only using this inside a very controlled environment, ideally one with no internet access, like a Docker dev container. Think of it like letting a powerful tool off its leash, but only inside a very secure, padded room.
Got it. Handle with extreme care, in a safe space only. Okay, changing gears. What about just understanding a code base better? That code base Q&A idea sounded super useful, especially for onboarding or exploring.
Oh, it's fantastic for that. When you're new to a project or even just digging into a part you don't know well, Claude can be like your personal guide. You can ask it the same kinds of questions you'd ask a senior dev. How does login work here? How do I add a new API endpoint? What does this weird async move block actually do? Because Claude can search and read the code, it can answer a huge range of questions.
What kinds of specific questions work well here?
You could ask it to explain a specific function, identify edge cases it handles, dig into the Git history to find out why something was designed a certain way, or even show you examples of a pattern used elsewhere in the code. You could even ask, what's the Python equivalent of this Rust code? Stuff like that. Anthropic says they use this a lot for onboarding new folks, speeds things up dramatically, saves senior engineers time answering the same basic questions, and usually you don't need special prompts, just ask naturally.
That's huge. Like having an infinitely patient expert pair programmer available 24/7. What about using Claude for Git itself? Version control.
Yeah, Claude can handle a surprising amount of Git work. A lot of engineers at Anthropic apparently use Claude for most of their day-to-day Git stuff now.
Really? Like what?
You can ask it to search the history, find when a change happened, who wrote a feature, why a certain API looks the way it does. Sometimes helps to explicitly say, look at the Git history for that. It's also great at writing commit messages. It looks at your changes, considers recent history, and usually writes a pretty good conventional message. And it can even help with trickier things like reverting changes, figuring out nasty merge conflicts, or comparing patches between branches.
So it's not just creating code, but managing its history too. What about GitHub specifically?
Integrates really well there too. It knows par is shorthand for creating a pull request, and it'll draft a title and description based on your commits. It can even try to fix simple code review comments directly. You can tell it, like, fix the comments on my PR, and it'll attempt to make the changes. Plus, helping fix failing CI builds, addressing linter warnings from GitHub checks, even helping triage new issues. It means less hopping back and forth to the GitHub website and less trying to remember all the Git command options.
Moving out that GitHub workflow sounds like a win. Okay, one more specific area, Jupyter Notebooks. How does Claude handle those for the data science folks?
Yeah, Anthropic's researchers use Claude with notebooks all the time. Claude can read IPNB files, the code cells, the markdown, and even interpret the outputs, like tables and plots, including images. So it's great for exploring data, understanding an analysis, or generating new code within the notebook. No special prompts needed usually, but a good workflow is having Claude open in one pane and the notebook in another, side by side. You can also ask it to do things like clean up a notebook, make the explanations clearer, or even improve the look of your plots before you share them. Just asking it to make things more aesthetically pleasing can work surprisingly well.
Okay, wow, that covers a lot of ground on workflows. Now, how do we really dial things in, optimize how we interact with Claude to get the best results most efficiently?
The absolute number one thing. Be specific in your instructions, especially that first time you ask. Clear, detailed prompts right up front saves so much back and forth later, less correction, less iteration, just faster results.
Can you give an example, like bad prompt versus good prompt?
Sure, instead of just add tests for foo.py, try something like write a new unit test in test_foo.py for the calculated discount function in foo.py. Focus on the case where a premium user applies a coupon. Make sure the discount is right. Don't use mocks for this one. See the difference. Or instead of why is this ATI so complex? Try look at the Git history for execution factory in corefactory.py. Summarize why the API evolved this way, especially around adding async tasks. For UI, instead of add a calendar widget, be way more detailed. Look at how the recent activity widget in dashboard components activity.js works data fetching, state, rendering. Follow that pattern to build a new calendar widget in dashboard components calendar.js. It needs to fetch events from AP events and let users pick a month year. Use only our existing UI library, no new dependencies. The more detail you give, the better Claude understands, the closer the first result will be to what you actually want. It's like giving a human dev a good spec.
Huge difference. It's about removing ambiguity up front. What about using images in our prompts?
Yeah, Claude can handle images surprisingly well. You can paste screenshots, drag image files in, or give it a file path. Super useful for UI development from mockups, obviously, but also for data analysis if you have charts or diagrams you want it to understand or work with. And even if you're not giving it an image, explicitly telling Claude that the visual appearance or layout matters can help guide it when it's generating visual output.
Good to know Claude has eyes. Any other practical tips for smoother interactions?
Definitely use tab completion for file names and folders. Helps Claude know exactly what you mean. You can give it URLs to read too. Just use allowed tools to whitelist domains you trust so it's allowed to fetch from them. And this is really important. Don't just rely on auto accept mode. Course correct early and often. It feels faster to just hit yes all the time, but actively guiding Claude usually gets you to the right answer faster overall.
So it's not set and forget. How do we actually do that course correction effectively?
Few key things. Ask it for a plan before it codes and tell it to wait for your okay. If you see it going sideways, hit escape. That interrupts it but keeps your conversation history so you can redirect it. Double tap escape lets you jump back even further in the history, edit an older prompt, and try again from there. And if it makes changes you don't like, just tell it undo the last changes, or be more specific about what to revert. Using these tools actively is usually much better than passive acceptance.
Those are great practical ways to keep it on track. What about managing the conversation itself? Sessions can get long.
Exactly. The context window can fill up with old stuff that's not relevant anymore, which can sometimes confuse Claude. Good habit. Use clear between different tasks to wipe the slate clean and keep Claude focused on what you're doing now. And for really big multi-step things like a major code migration or fixing hundreds of lint errors, use checklists or scratch pads, just a simple markdown file or maybe a GitHub issue. Have Claude dump its progress there. Like, for linting.lictor, Write all errors to lint.checklist.md, then tell Claude to work through the list, checking items off as it fixes them. Keeps things organized.
That's a smart way to manage complex tasks. And lastly, how do we get data into Claude efficiently?
Several ways. Simple copy-paste works for text, obviously. For bigger files like logs, you can pipe stuff in from your command line, catlog.txt Claude. You can tell Claude to run bash commands to fetch data itself, use MCP servers if they provide data, or use custom slash commands you've built for data access. And of course, just telling it to read local files or fetch URLs. Often you'll use a mix of these depending on the situation.
Okay, we've really covered the interactive side. But Claude Code also has this headless mode for automation, right?
Yep, exactly. Headless mode is run using Claude KigPeer from your command line. It's meant for non-interactive stuff like CI/CD pipelines, Git hooks, automation scripts. You pass the prompt with the DIP flag, and you can use output format stream.json to get structured output that other scripts can easily understand. Key thing, headless sessions don't remember anything from one run to the next. Each run is totally separate. You have to trigger it each time.
What are some good use cases for headless mode?
Anthropic gives the example of auto-triaging GitHub issues. A script could trigger on new issues, call Claude Headless to analyze the text, and have Claude suggest or even apply labels. You could also use it in CI as a kind of super linter. Go beyond basic syntax checks to look for things like unclear variable names, typos and comments, maybe even suggest stylistic improvements that normal linters miss.
Using AI for subjective code review in CI. That's interesting. Okay, for the real power users, what about multi-Claude workflows? Sounds intense.
It can be, but also really powerful. The idea is running multiple Claude instances at the same time. A simple version is having one Claude write code and another one review or test that code in parallel. Separate context windows for each task can sometimes lead to better focus. You could even have them coordinate slightly by writing to shared Scratchpad files, if you get fancy.
Like a little AI coding team working together. What else can you do with multiple Claudes?
Another way is just having multiple Git checkouts of your repo in different folders. Open each in a separate terminal, run Claude in each, and work on different features or bugs simultaneously. No waiting. A lighter way to do that, often better, is using Git work trees. Lets you have multiple branches checked out in different directories, but they all share the same underlying Git history. Great for working on separate things in parallel within the same repo using different Claude instances, without worrying about stepping on each other's toes or creating merge nightmares.
Git work trees.
Yeah.
Clever. Any tips for using those with Claude?
Yeah, name your work trees clearly so you know what's what. Use one terminal per work tree. Maybe set up notifications if you use iTerm2 so you know which Claude needs attention. Separate IDE windows help too. And definitely remember clean up work trees you're done with using Git work tree remove. Keeps things tidy.
And how does headless mode fit into these bigger automated multi-Claude setups?
Headless mode, Claude NP, plus some custom scripting, is how you build really large-scale automated workflows. Two main patterns. One is fanning out. Use Claude to generate a big list of tasks like files to migrate, then spin up many parallel headless Claude processes to chew through that list, each doing one task. Great for migrations or large analyses. Claude just needs to return a clear success-fail message for the script. The other is pipelining. Stick Claude right into an existing script. Pipe data into Claude-P, maybe use the JSON output flag to feed its results into the next command in your pipeline. For debugging these complex scripts, the verbose flag for headless mode is your friend. Just remember to turn it off in production.
Wow, okay, that's a serious deep dive into the advanced stuff. We've gone from just setting up CLODE.md all the way to orchestrating multiple headless Claudes.
We really have. And it's worth saying, again, these best practices, they're starting points. What works best for you will depend on your projects, your style, your team. The real key is experimentation. Try things out, see what clicks, refine your approach.
Absolutely. And if you want to go even deeper, Anthropic's own documentation at Claude.ai Code is the place to go. It's got tons more detail, more examples, more advanced stuff.
Yeah, it's a really solid resource. Definitely check it out if you want to keep learning.
So as we wrap this up, here's something to think about. How is integrating tools like Claude Code going to change your day-to-day development, your team's collaboration, the whole process of building software? It feels like things are changing fast, and we're maybe just seeing the beginning. Thanks for diving deep with us today.